Senator of Appropriations. There he is. Good morning, sir. It's good to see you. How are you?
Great, Paul. Thank you. Good to see you, too.
Good to see you, and I can hear you loud and clear, so let's get this thing done. There's a lot to talk about. Number one, as far as the budget's concerned, everything else, as we move in rapidly to 2023, it always seems like it's just fast speed. We're decorating, we're taking decorations down, we're opening packages, the empty tree, and all of a sudden, boom, time to pack your bags and go to Jackson again, and it'll be here before you know it. Tell me a little bit as far as the Senate Budget Chairman, where we are now and what plans do we have to make sure we allocate all of this additional money and everything else. And I know you guys have been working on this through the summer, but give us a little bit of a report to the people across the state.
Sure. Thank you, Paul. Glad to be with you. We have a good economic times right now in Mississippi. Obviously, there's some forecasts about things out there maybe next year that we need to be looking at. But overall, pretty good in Mississippi. We've got about $1.5 billion in excess revenue right now. We just have preliminarily set a budget of about $7.5 billion for next year. And so things are looking pretty good. One of the things we tried to do, as you know from the past session, we had a significant tax cut that's going to go into effect. We've had a huge teacher pay raise, the largest in the history of the state. Yeah. Infrastructure investment with the ARPA funds. We had investment in water and sewer projects. So a lot of things that are going on. And I look forward towards this next year continuing some of those investments in the state infrastructure and to take a look at some other policies and programs that we're going to be trying to push forward next year. Kind of investments in the future is probably the way to put it.
You said $7.5 billion was our budget, our new budget. Is that up or down from last year?
Oh, it's up. It's up significantly.
It is.
But that's not setting the budget. That's actually what the estimated revenue is going to be. So let me.
The revenue. Okay.
Yeah, that's the expectation of what the budget really won't be set for next fiscal year until we're in session, and that'll be done right at the end of March or April of 2023. Yeah.
When you look at what the governor said, and the governor basically put forth his goals for the 2023, and one of those happens to be an advancement or maybe some type of readjustment on last year's or the 2022 session as far as income tax, and maybe speeding that up a bit. I get the feeling that might be some concerns about that in the House and in the Senate, but your thoughts as chairman of Appropriations, should we just let what we pass work its way through for the next couple of years, or should we come in and readjust the personal income tax down even more?
Yeah, let me I think a few things I want to kind of throw into this cake mix, if you will. One is we really had just finishing up the tax cuts we implemented in 2016. So understand that. And for all the listeners, you need to know we had a significant tax cut then that's just now getting fully implemented. The tax cut that we passed this past year really hasn't even begun to take effect. So we're going to see that kick in over the next 4 years. And then, Paul, one of the things that I want to be real clear about, I don't want the train to wreck. Obviously, I want to put as much money in the taxpayer's pocket as possible, but I also don't want the train to get off the tracks on the economy. Everybody knows that we've had an incredible influx of funds, federal funds, plus the economy's has been booming here since coming out of COVID. So that combination of factors has led to this surplus we're talking about. But then I go to, I was at a fiscal leaders symposium about 2 weeks ago down in New Orleans, and hearing from some of the nation's economists and forecasters, and frankly, nobody's putting in their bet on what's going to happen, but I think for the most part, people believe there's going to be at least a slight recession next year. 2023, we're going to have some recessionary indicators. You go from everything to maybe just flat or slight recession all the way to the possibility of stagflation. Now, I don't want to get people alarmed here on the radio that we're going to get into a place where we got high interest rates, high unemployment, or any of those things, because I'm not suggesting that. But they have given us some of the forecast models to look at, and that's certainly going to affect the way we do business in the state. And I think some of that's going to be seen when we get back in session in the spring, is that we'll have a better indication about how the economy is looking, particularly here in Mississippi, because Mississippi is unique. We typically, when it comes to inflation, recessionary trends, we're sometimes slow to get in and slower to come out. We really don't feel the effects quite as hard as maybe the nation does, but we also don't maybe feel the boom times quite as good as some do when things are going great. So, those are all factors that I will be looking at, and I think my colleagues in the legislature will look at as we start setting our final budget.
Possibility of maybe taking one of those out and maybe just looking, let's just go back and revisit the grocery tax and forget about changing anything else, or that plays into it also? Because what people don't realize, and maybe you can give us the number, what is the number we take out of the budget with just what has been passed now? And it's literally hundreds of millions of dollars that will not be in the revenue because of that, right?
Yeah, you're talking about from the last year's tax cuts?
Yeah.
Well,
what will the current tax cuts cost the general revenue?
I think when it's all said and done, there's no way to put an exact number on it, because it's going to be based on what the income is, or how much money is brought in on taxes, and then you factor that at the percentage. But just taking away the 5% and moving, I'm sorry, taking away the 4%, getting it 4%. Eliminated the first year is initially $185 million. Now, of course, if we have more income, and I think right now trends are looking good, it could be as much as $200 million. I think when the full implementation of these tax cuts go into place, you're talking about probably somewhere in the neighborhood, high $600 million of tax of revenue decrease. Now, keep in mind that obviously some of those extra funds, and what we want is those extra funds in the taxpayer's pocket, because they get to utilize that, and it ends up being some additional taxes on sales tax, and of course increased revenue possibly as they expand the economy. So those are the good sides of a tax cut, is it puts more money floating around in the economy. Yeah.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, we'll get some data on that too for the first 180 in the first years, to find out how much that's going back in and bolstering that. Won't be the greatest time to get that accurate data if we're certainly washing our way through a recession, and the inflation prices are absolutely crazy out there. But inflation also has a lot to do with your job as budget appropriations chairman, because everything costs more. Everybody needs more. Schools need more for gas. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Well, that's something people forget, Paul, and I'm glad you bring it up, is that the government's not immune to inflation. Unfortunately, we have to put gas in our troopers' cars, and we've got to put gas in our school buses, and we've got to buy equipment for safety reasons. And of course, we've talked a lot about infrastructure. It costs more to build a bridge than it did 3 years ago. It costs more to come up with, corrections. If you're going to have a prison, or if you're going to have mental health facilities, if you're going to have health treatment, it costs more to do business now, and that certainly affects government. Now, the good thing about it in Mississippi is we typically spend, or we have to increase to meet those demands at a lower rate than what the rest of the economy does. So I feel proud of the fact, since I've been there, our decreases, or rather increases in budget, has been less than what inflation has been, and that's a good thing. I think something we can be proud of, and certainly this next year is going to be a real test for us, because I'm already hearing from our agencies, Paul, that a lot of them are coming in saying, hey, we had this much money this year, but do you realize this is costing us much more money than we had forecast because of the high cost of goods and doing business?
I do want to ask you this when we come back with a quick segment here, is because you do have $1.5 billion. There's everybody asking for more money, but we do have a couple of legal issues from the feds that are breathing down our neck. One is going to be in the prisons. And is anybody come to you and talk to you from the Department of Corrections or anybody else in the committees saying that we need to seriously consider funding a new prison? I'll ask you about tonight.
Yeah, we're concerned. And in fact, I think a couple of schools in our area have canceled for the day with the expectation that there's going to be some pretty significant weather. So, yeah.
I do want to ask you this, because we had talked about earlier with, I think, the Commissioner Burl Cain on the need for a new prison. Is that part of the discussion that will take place in the session in January?
Well, I think what we tried to do over the last couple of years is get Walnut Grove. I think that's what he's talking about, is getting Walnut Grove up to speed. And I think Commissioner Cain's done a good job of kind of moving people around and working with the facilities that he has right now. I know there's been discussion about trying to fix up a few things, and we've done some already up at Parchman, but making sure that we've got good facilities. I think the biggest concern he's got is making sure he's got the ability to get good staff. For a long time, I think the pay was so low.
Yep.
We've given significant pay increases there because we recognize that there's a shortage of staff with corrections, and that's not something anybody wants. So hopefully that's he's got the authority to get the people he needs to get and pay them at a fair rate so we can keep our prisons safe.
I do want to ask you, as far as your committee is concerned, anything else that is going to be top and paramount to you as the session begins, as far as appropriations? I know everything is part of that, but as far as personally and the people in your district.
Yeah, Paul, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. You talked about the excess funds we have, and I filed a bill last year for a tax rebate. One of the things that I wanted to do, particularly when you have uncertain times, is I want the people to prosper when we're prospering, and right now we are. And I've proposed last year, and we'll propose again this year, a tax rebate, which is a one-time tax payment, and you're not going to wreck the budget by doing that. We know there's enough funds to be able to utilize that. And I feel like, especially if we end up in a recession next year, the opportunity to get some funds out and get it in people's pockets to help them absorb some of the high cost of products. My wife tells me every time she goes to the store to grocery shop, and occasionally when I get to go, it's just amazing how much the prices have risen on food and some of the essentials that we have to have. And so I recognize that, and I want to see if we're in a tough spot to be able to give some, one-time funds. Obviously that helps the economy overall, but that's something I'll be looking at again this year, and I'll have a few other, smaller things. But main thing, like you said, is to focus on the overall budget. That's, I feel like, my most important job in the Senate.
Would that be based on household income or just one straight check, regardless of household income? How would that work out?
It would be what I proposed last year was an income-based model where you would have at least anybody that paid an income tax would get some measure of relief, and then there would be a cap on the top end. So, you're not going to have runaway cost, and obviously somebody that pays a ton in is not going to get, but overall based on a percentage with a cap and a floor.
Haven't asked this in a while. What's our rainy day fund look like? What's the total there?
Well, it's always 10% of our revenue, 10% of our budgeted amount. So we're gonna be that'll be capped out at 10%. Something else I wouldn't mind looking at is seeing if we need to tweak that a little bit to see if we can maybe go up with the expectation again that costs of things are getting higher, and to give us a little bit of a cushion in the event that we do have a recession or things go back down. So that's something I'm open to discussing more.
One of the toughest numbers to put any figure on for the future has continued to be the marijuana legislation. We have no idea what the tax rolls are going to be on that one and how much money we're going to make from that. Is anybody, and it's still a moving target, is it not?
It is, yeah. And I really don't know. I've heard anywhere from 30 to 60 or 80 million, but I don't know what that number is going to be.
It'll be interesting. All right, my man, anything else you want to mention? We got a couple of seconds here, but is that it? I think a good report, looking pretty good.
Yeah, just hoping everybody has a great holiday season, and I think we'll see some things rise to the top as we get into session. You know how that works every year. There will be some things that you and I haven't thought about today, and come January, it'll be a hot topic, and we'll have to address it. So, but I'm looking forward to a good session this year, and I hope we can do some good things that are very impactful long-term for our state.
Mr. Mayor over there is making some news about some creative things that he's been doing. He's always in the news, my friend George Flaggs. And not to be outdone is another Vicksburg guy who puts on his Superman cape in spandex, Dr. Easterling, and goes and saves a life. You people at Vicksburg, y'all stay busy and in the news over there.
Well, we try to keep it going. Obviously, we've got our lieutenant governor's a Vicksburg native, and our insurance commissioner is a Vicksburg native, and we've got Dr. Easterling and Dr. Edney's our state health officer. So a lot
that's true. I forgot about that. Whoa, that's a gang over there. All right, thank you, man. Appreciate it very, very much. Now that we got the river back up to a little bit higher, that's not one of the news stories from Vicksburg. Thank you.